Alright, for today's critical thought, we're going to be talking about one of my favorite terms when it comes to game design, and that is randomization, aka RNGesus, aka the game said I had a 90% chance to hit and I missed, so therefore it's broken and you suck as a developer. Whatever you call it, RNG or random number generator in video games is a core component of many, and I do mean many, titles released since the industry's inception. And I'm very certain that for you guys watching this right now, especially my regulars, you guys like games with randomization in them. Now, what's very interesting, and we are not going to be talking about everything that has to do with RNG in this video, is that there are examples both large and small in terms of the impact they have on playing a game and the design. When we think about things on the large end of the scale, we can talk about titles that have randomized loot drops like ARPGs, random probability of hits such as in strategy games or tactical games. We can talk about levels that are being designed randomly. Also, one quick note, we won't be discussing procedural design or procedural generated design in this video because that is another topic in of itself. Now, on the small end of the scale when it comes to RNG, we can talk about things as simple as the chance of finding treasure when you interact with an event, or what attack an enemy will use while you're fighting them. In the Soulsborne series, for instance, despite being very much predominantly about the player's action, there is RNG built into the game based on the enemies. The enemy AI is designed around using set attacks, but it will pick them at random and also based on the position or distance relative from the boss to the character, or I should say the enemy to the character. Now, the key point why RNG is used is very simple. It keeps the game from being stale. If the game played exactly the same way every time you played it, that's not too much of an exciting game. Especially if your game has a very simple gameplay loop, that if you know exactly how it's going to happen every second you're playing, and you have 50 to 100 hours of content, you're going to get bored of that very quickly. Now, when it comes to manipulating or mitigating RNG, we'll talk about that in a few minutes. The important point, and basically our key topic for today, is understanding just how much randomization or RNG will impact playing a game. Because that is the tricky part. RNG is not like candy or cake, where the more you have of it will make it better. Or something else. I think of a better analogy there. But the idea is that just making your game more random doesn't automatically make it better. And this is true of everything from linear titles to completely randomly generated roguelikes. The one thing you have to understand about randomization is that complete randomization is not advised. What we mean is that anything and everything can happen at any point of playing your game. So we could load up a roguelike where I take 2 steps forward, the final boss spawns, kills me 1 hit, it's game over. I reload the game, I take 2 steps forward, I find the greatest weapon in the game, and I proceed to beat the game like, it was a piece of cake. The problem with pure randomization or complete randomization like that is that if the player has no means or ability to control what's happening in the game or get around RNG, then it's not really about them playing the game. It's again more akin to a slot machine. I pull the lever this time, I die, or I don't get anything. I pull it again, I get the best weapon, the game is easy. And I have played games lately that go a little bit too much into RNG, at least for my tastes. A few weeks ago I did a spotlight for the indie game I Am Overburdened, which is a very basic roguelike. And in the game, success or failure is not determined by how you play the game, but by what items the game decides to spawn or generate on the field. If you go 2 to 3 levels and you're not finding any good loot, you're not going to beat that game. But on the other hand, if on the very first level you get some really amazing gear, that could basically get you all the way through to the end. Another example would be a game like Tharsis, which we have talked about extensively whenever we have these randomization talks. But that is a game where basically success or failure is right down to dice rolls that sometimes you do, and sometimes it's on the back end of what the game spawns. Now, lately I tried playing the Curious Expedition, and that is another game that I felt the RNG was a little too much, I think, in play for me. And what do I mean about that? The reason, or in the Curious Expedition, this is a game where the levels are procedurally generated, and then of course events and items are set up in various parts on the map. You have no idea what you're going to find, and you're basically given a general direction of, say, okay, go this way and you may find the main quests. The problem is that if you're not getting lucky, or you're just getting like bad events along the way, it will lead to you just failing no matter what you do. Now, on the other hand, I am more than fine with randomization in a game like Renowned Explorers, which in that game the levels again are randomly generated and there are random events. But I am given a good idea that I'm starting here, we have to get over here. And I know exactly what path I can take and come up with alternate plans if they come up. Even though the game literally has a wheel of chance that pops up when you have to do an event, I'm more accepting of that. And that takes me to the final point and a major part of talking about randomization. Or I'm sorry, we actually have one other point to talk about after this. And that is mitigating or controlling or manipulating RNG. Some of the best players of games that are built on randomly generated content or events knows that there are ways to manipulate things in your favor. In Diablo, for instance, I could fight all the mobs on a map, but I also know that elite packs have the greatest chance of dropping rare or higher quality gear. So if I focus on fighting those things explicitly and ignore everything else, I'm going to be able to move through the game a lot quicker and kind of put the RNG into my favor. Because if all I'm fighting are elite packs, then I know the game's going to be constantly creating the better items. We can also see this in many a speedrun, where players will know the exact steps to walk, the exact actions to do, to trick the game into performing the respective results. And there's a lot more we can talk about on that front. But the point is, when it comes to RNG like this, some of the best games that make use of it allow the player to either understand how it works and get around it, or tilt it in their favor. XCOM, for instance, or the XCOMs from Firaxis. Anyone knows that if you're shooting an enemy from the front, you have less of a chance to attack them, or to hit. So, you do flanking shots. And expert players know to position their party to try and exploit those whenever possible. And when it works, it gives them a greater chance of succeeding. If you've watched expert players do XCOM or XCOM 2, they have the same amount of chance to hit that we do. But by understanding the ways of controlling the RNG, they are less likely to put themselves in a bad position. Now, the last point that I want to talk about and why RNG is so polarizing goes back to what I said at the very beginning. The ever popular, if the game says I have a 9% chance, surely that means I'm going to hit every time. But as any player of roguelikes or designers will tell you, 99% doesn't equal 100. And one of the hardest aspects to get across when it comes to RNG is explaining it to a player. As we talked about before, when it comes to RNG, a lot of it works on the back end. Just because you see the game put up a 60% chance to hit, 80% chance, 10% chance, you are very rarely given exactly why you have that percentage. Some games may offer additional tooltips, others may use abstracted numbers, such as if your accuracy is, you have an accuracy level of 20, it's higher than the enemy's defense level at 15, so you have a greater chance to hit. But that's not what's going on behind the scenes. And when it comes to RNG, it's very hard for the player to understand just what it is they're doing to impact it. For instance, and I mentioned this on our last talk, let's say in a game I have a skill that gives me a 15% bonus chance to hit an enemy. So I have a 50% chance to hit them now. I use the skill, it goes up to 65. And then on that third turn, I hit them. The problem is, did that 15% chance actually do anything? Was it going to work even with the 50%? The player has no idea of knowing. Likewise, let's say I have a case where I miss 3 90% chances in a row. How do you convey to the player why they missed? In most cases, you're not. And the player's left sitting there going, the game said I had 90% chance and it missed. So what's going on there? And then, of course, on their fourth hit or their next one, they'll hit like a 50% chance, which will completely skew the results. And this is why you have to be very careful with how much RNG impacts a game. Because we have seen games where the win or loss, or win or lose, is determined by one roll of the dice, or 1% chance, or one draw from a deck. And it can be very frustrating to lose a run or a play when you had no control over what happened. Or even if you did have control, you may not understand the advanced mechanics. And it's very important when you have games heavily built on RNG to try and educate the player as to what is controlling it. What are the ways to impact or downplay it? Because once they start learning that, they can start to see and make that leap between what I'm doing and why this is working or not working. But with that said, thank you for watching today's Critical Thought. One final question for you folks watching this. When it comes to randomization or RNG in games, what do you prefer? Do you like games that are as close to complete RNG as possible? Again, the games where anything and everything can happen. Or do you prefer games that offer a little bit more control? That the experience has set algorithms or systems in place to make sure that the game gives you a fairly similar result or very similar playthrough each time, but there are some variations that can come up. Because again, the more RNG that can happen, it can lead to some very crazy situations, such as in the Binding of Isaac, where I pick up the upgrade that lets me shoot bombs. Then I pick up Brimstone. Then I pick up the one that spreads that shot. And suddenly I'm spitting bombs out that completely cover the screen in blood lasers that kill everything. Or on your next run you get Soy Milk, which as Binding of Isaac fans, you guys get that reference. But let me know what you think in the comments below, and thank you so much for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe, and let me know if you have any suggestions for future vlogs. But otherwise, be sure to tune in for more discussions on design on here and on GameWisdom.com. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, be sure to like and subscribe to the channel. Check back around 10 Eastern for regular streaming. If you'd like to suggest games for me to cover or topics to talk about, let me know in the comments below. For a collection of my writings as well as weekly podcasts on design, check out game-wisdom.com. To support the Game Wisdom Patreon, you can find us on there on patreon.com/gwbicer. $1 will get you into our private Discord channel where we talk game topics and more. $5 will get you voting privileges for any major event, including the Saturday Night Grab Bag, Patreon-funded goals, and more. Thanks again for watching, and I hope you enjoy more videos here on the Game Wisdom YouTube channel.